I stood there in my best suit, the one I'd been saving for this day since Sarah was born, watching my only daughter walk down that aisle on the arm of a man I'd never met in my life. And when the officiant asked, "Who gives this bride away?" he looked right through me, like I was a ghost sitting in the fourth row, and said, "I give myself away." 27 years of late-night fevers, college tuition I couldn't afford, and walking her through every heartbreak she ever had. And she erased me with 4 words. But here's what she didn't know. That fancy country club wedding, the imported flowers, the ice sculpture, the prime rib for 200 guests, I was the one who'd been secretly paying for all of it. And when that bill came due 3 days later, well, let's just say my little girl was about to learn the hardest lesson of her privileged life. My name is Richard Sullivan, and I'm 72 years old now, sitting here in my den with a cup of coffee that's gone cold while I tell you this story. Some nights, I still can't believe it happened the way it did. But it did happen, every word of it, and I need to get it off my chest, because it's been eating at me for 5 years now. So wherever you're watching this from, whatever time it is in your part of the world, settle in. This one's going to take a minute, and if you've got a daughter, or a son, or anyone you've sacrificed everything for, well, you might want to subscribe to my channel, because I've got more stories like this. Stories about what happens when the people we love most forget where they came from. Sarah was born on a Tuesday in March of 1985, screaming her lungs out like she was already mad at the world for something. Her mother, Jennifer, and I were just kids ourselves, 23 years old, living in a 1-bedroom apartment above a hardware store in Pittsburgh. I was working 2 jobs back then, driving a delivery truck during the day and stocking shelves at a grocery store 3 nights a week. Jennifer waited tables at a diner, coming home smelling like coffee and bacon grease, counting her tips on our kitchen table while I rubbed her swollen feet. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and we had this beautiful baby girl who looked at us like we hung the moon and stars. I'll never forget the first time Sarah reached up and grabbed my finger with her tiny hand. I was holding her at 3 in the morning because she wouldn't stop crying, and Jennifer was so exhausted she was practically sleepwalking. And then Sarah just looked at me with those big blue eyes and squeezed my finger, and I swear to God, something shifted in my chest. I knew right then that I would do anything, give up anything, sacrifice anything to make sure this little girl had a better life than I did. That's what fathers do, right? We build bridges for our kids to walk across, even if we have to lay down in the water to become the foundation. Jennifer died when Sarah was only 7 years old. Breast cancer, stage 4 by the time they caught it. We had 6 months from diagnosis to the funeral. 6 months of watching the woman I loved waste away while trying to pretend everything was going to be okay, so Sarah wouldn't be scared. Those last few weeks, Jennifer made me promise her 2 things. Take care of Sarah and make sure she goes to college. Make sure she has opportunities we never had. I held her hand in that hospital bed, and I promised. And 3 days later, she was gone. Just like that, it was just me and Sarah against the world. Raising a daughter alone wasn't easy, especially in those early years. I had to learn how to braid hair by watching YouTube videos at midnight. I had to figure out what to say when she got her first period and came out of the bathroom crying because she thought she was dying. I had to sit through parent-teacher conferences and school plays and birthday parties where I was the only dad in a room full of mothers who looked at me with this mix of pity and suspicion. But I did it, every single bit of it, because that's what I'd promised Jennifer. I wasn't going to let our daughter grow up feeling like she was missing anything just because her mother was gone. Sarah was a good kid growing up, really. Smart as a whip, always reading books that were too advanced for her age, asking questions that made my head spin. She got straight A's without me even having to push her, made the honor roll every semester, joined the debate team in high school. I was so damn proud of her, I could barely stand it. I went to every debate tournament, sitting in the back of those stuffy school auditoriums, watching my little girl argue circles around kids twice her size. Afterward, we'd go to this little diner near our house, and I'd buy her a milkshake, and she'd tell me all about her day, about her friends, about her dreams. Those were the best years of my life, I think. Just me and Sarah, partners in crime. The problem started when she went away to college. She got accepted to Stanford, full ride, and I was thrilled for her even though it meant she'd be 3,000 miles away. I drove her out there myself in my beat-up Ford truck, the same truck I still drive today, loaded down with all her stuff. We stopped at the Grand Canyon on the way, took a bunch of pictures, stayed in cheap motels. It was like one last adventure before everything changed. When I dropped her off at her dorm, she hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might crack, and she whispered, "Thank you for everything, Dad. I'm going to make you proud." And I said, "You already have, sweetheart. You already have." But California changed her. Or maybe it just revealed who she'd always wanted to be, I don't know. She came home for Thanksgiving her freshman year, wearing clothes I didn't recognize, using words I'd never heard her use before, talking about people and places that felt a million miles away from our little life in Pittsburgh. She seemed embarrassed when I picked her up at the airport in my truck, kept looking around like she was afraid someone from school might see her. At dinner, she corrected the way I held my fork, told me I shouldn't talk with my mouth full, little things that stung more than they should have. I told myself it was just growing pains, that she was finding herself, that it would pass. It didn't pass. Every time she came home, the distance between us grew a little wider. By her junior year, she'd stopped coming home for Thanksgiving altogether, said she had too much studying to do. Christmas visits got shorter and shorter. Phone calls became texts. Then the texts became less frequent. I kept sending her money, though, every month like clockwork, because I knew being a college student was expensive, and I wanted her to focus on her studies, not worry about working some part-time job. I was still driving that delivery truck, still stocking shelves at night, but now I was also doing weekend handyman work, fixing people's leaky faucets and painting their houses, squirreling away every extra dollar for Sarah's future. After Stanford, she got into Columbia Law School in New York City. More tuition, more expenses, more distance. I sold my mother's wedding ring to help with her first year, the ring I'd been planning to pass down to Sarah one day. I figured she'd need it for living expenses more than she'd need a piece of jewelry from a grandmother she barely remembered. Sarah never knew I sold it. She never asked where the money came from, just deposited the checks I sent and kept moving forward. I was proud of her. Don't get me wrong. My daughter, the lawyer, Jennifer, would have been over the moon. But sometimes late at night, I'd look at old pictures of Sarah as a little girl, before college, before law school, when I was still her hero instead of just a checkbook. She met Bradley during her second year at Columbia. Bradley Winston Ashford III, if you can believe that. His father owned a chain of luxury hotels. His mother sat on the board of some fancy museum in Manhattan. Bradley drove a BMW, wore suits that cost more than my monthly mortgage, and had never done a day of manual labor in his entire life. Sarah brought him home for Christmas that year, and I knew immediately that I was looking at my replacement. Not that Bradley was trying to be her father, mind you. He just represented everything I wasn't. Sophisticated, educated, wealthy, connected to a world I'd never be part of. When I shook his hand, it was soft as a baby's bottom, and he looked at my calluses like they might be contagious. I tried to like Bradley. I really did. I asked him about his work, his family, his interests, but every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. He'd talk about wine vintages, and I'd nod along like I knew what he meant. He'd mention restaurants in Manhattan, and I'd pretend I'd heard of them. Sarah would watch these exchanges with this tight little smile, and I could tell she was measuring me against him, finding me wanting. On Christmas morning, I gave Sarah a leather journal I'd saved up for, something I thought she could use to take notes in law school. Bradley gave her diamond earrings. The look on her face when she opened his gift, that genuine joy. That's when I knew I'd already lost her to this world I couldn't compete with. They got engaged 6 months later. Sarah called me on a Tuesday evening, breathless with excitement, telling me Bradley had proposed at some rooftop restaurant overlooking Central Park. She was talking so fast I could barely keep up, going on about the ring, the champagne, the photographer Bradley had secretly hired to capture the moment. "I'm getting married, Dad," she said, and I should have been happy, should have been thrilled for her. But all I could think was that she'd called me forth, after her roommate, after Bradley's parents, after posting it on Instagram for 5,000 strangers to see. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I told her, my voice catching. "Your mother would be so happy." There was a pause on her end, like she'd forgotten for a minute that she'd ever had a mother. The wedding planning started immediately, and from the beginning, I was sidelined. Sarah and Bradley's mother, Catherine, took over everything. They'd have meetings at Catherine's penthouse in Manhattan, picking out flowers and photographers and cake designs, and I'd get a phone call afterward with updates. "Dad, we found the most amazing venue," Sarah would say. "It's this gorgeous country club in Connecticut, right on the water." I'd ask how much it cost, and she'd brush me off. "Don't worry about it, Dad. Catherine's helping with everything." But what she didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was that Catherine had come to me 3 months earlier with a proposal. We met at a coffee shop in Midtown, Catherine in her Chanel suit and pearls, me in my work jeans and flannel shirt, feeling like I'd wandered into the wrong life. She got right to the point, the way rich people do when they're used to buying what they want. "Richard," she said, stirring her latte with a tiny spoon, "I'm going to be frank with you. This wedding is important to our family, to our social circle. Bradley is our only son. We want this to be an event people remember." I nodded, not sure where this was going. "The problem," she continued, "is that Sarah has, well, let's say she has champagne taste but a beer budget, if you understand my meaning." I understood perfectly. She was saying my daughter wanted things I couldn't afford. "Here's what I propose," Catherine said, leaning forward like we were conspirators. "You cover the costs of the wedding, all of it, and I'll make sure Sarah never knows. We'll tell her that Bradley and I are paying for everything. That way, she can have the wedding of her dreams without feeling embarrassed about where the money came from." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Embarrassed. About me. About my money. My sacrifices. But Catherine wasn't done. "I know this seems harsh, Richard, but think about Sarah. If she knows you're paying for a $700,000 wedding, she'll feel guilty. She'll scale everything back. She won't enjoy her own day. This way, everyone gets what they want." $700,000. The number hung in the air between us like a neon sign. That was more money than I'd made in the last 10 years combined. But I looked at Catherine's perfectly made-up face, her expectant expression, and I thought about Sarah, about how she'd already drifted so far from me. Maybe this was my last chance to do something meaningful for her, to show her I loved her even if she didn't want me front and center anymore. "I'll need time," I told Catherine. "Time to liquidate some assets, to get the money together." She smiled then, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. You have 6 months. And Richard, this stays between us. Sarah must never know." I left that coffee shop feeling sick to my stomach. But I also left knowing what I had to do. Over the next 6 months, I sold everything that wasn't nailed down. My mother's antique furniture, my father's coin collection, the small rental property I'd been holding on to for retirement. I took out a second mortgage on my house, cashed out my 401k, borrowed money from my brother Tom, who thought I'd lost my mind. Every penny went into an account Catherine had set up, payments made to vendors on a schedule she created. The wedding grew more elaborate with each passing week. Ice sculptures, imported orchids, a 12-piece band, a videographer from Hollywood, champagne that cost more per bottle than my weekly grocery bill. And Sarah thought it was all coming from Bradley's family, from people who actually belonged in that world. I got the invitation in the mail 4 months before the wedding. This heavy cardstock thing with gold lettering and tissue paper. Mr. Bradley Winston Ashford III and Ms. Sarah Jennifer Sullivan request the honor of your presence. My name was nowhere on it. Not listed as father of the bride, not mentioned in the program Sarah sent me a week later. When I called to ask about it, Sarah sighed like I was being difficult. Dad, Catherine thought it would be more elegant to keep it simple. Besides, you're still invited. You'll be there. That's what matters. I wanted to ask if it mattered where I'd be sitting, if it mattered that I was dropping $750,000 on a wedding where I was treated like a distant relative. But I didn't. I just said, "Okay, sweetheart, whatever you want." The rehearsal dinner was the night before the wedding, held at some exclusive yacht club where the cheapest entree cost more than I used to spend on groceries for a month. I showed up in my best suit, the navy blue one I'd worn to my own father's funeral, the only suit I owned. Everyone else was in designer everything, diamonds glittering under the chandelier light, conversations flowing about summer homes and European vacations. I stood in the corner nursing a whiskey, watching Sarah laugh with Bradley's friends, people who'd known her for all of 3 years acting like they'd been family forever. She saw me watching and came over, kissed my cheek. "Thanks for coming, Dad," she said, like I'd driven in from out of town instead of paying for this entire circus. Bradley's father, Winston, gave a toast that night, going on about how proud he was to welcome Sarah into their family, how she was exactly the kind of woman they'd always hoped Bradley would marry. Smart, beautiful, accomplished. Not a word about where she came from, who raised her, what it took to get her to this moment. Then Catherine stood up and talked about the wedding tomorrow, how it was going to be the social event of the season, how grateful they were to everyone for being part of Bradley and Sarah's special day. When she finished, people applauded, and Sarah hugged her, actually hugged her, with more warmth than I'd felt from my daughter in 5 years. I finished my whiskey and ordered another. That night, alone in my hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone. I had Catherine's number pulled up, my thumb hovering over the call button. I could still back out, I thought. I could tell Sarah the truth, let the whole thing come crashing down, force her to see what I'd done for her. But then I thought about her face at the rehearsal dinner, how happy she looked, how she glowed when people complimented the wedding plans, and I thought about Jennifer, about the promise I'd made to give Sarah opportunities we never had. This was an opportunity, wasn't it? To marry into a family that could give her everything I couldn't? So I put the phone down, took a sleeping pill, and tried not to think about tomorrow. The morning of the wedding, I woke up early, got dressed in my suit, and stared at myself in the mirror. 72 years old, looking every day of it, with calloused hands and tired eyes, and a face that showed every mile I'd traveled to get here. I'd given Sarah everything I had, everything Jennifer and I had dreamed of for her, and in a few hours, I was going to sit in the 4th row of a country club chapel and watch her pretend I barely existed. But that was okay, I told myself. That was the price of love. You give everything and sometimes you get nothing back, and you do it anyway because they're your child, your blood, your heart walking around outside your body. The ceremony was at 2 in the afternoon, and I got there early, watched the florists put the final touches on arrangements that probably cost more than my truck. The country club was stunning. I'll give them that. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Long Island Sound, white roses and orchids everywhere, chairs draped in ivory silk. It was the kind of place where I'd normally come to fix the plumbing or repair a broken railing, not attend a wedding. I found my seat in the 4th row, right behind Bradley's college roommate and his wife, people I'd never met. Sarah's side of the aisle was noticeably smaller than Bradley's, just a handful of her law school friends, my brother Tom and his wife, a couple of cousins. Most of the guests were on Bradley's side, a sea of designer suits and expensive jewelry. When the music started, Everyone stood, and Sarah appeared at the back of the aisle on the arm of Winston Ashford, Bradley's father. Not me. Winston. Catherine had asked me 2 months ago if I'd be okay with Winston walking Sarah down the aisle, said it would mean so much to their family, said it was really more of a symbolic gesture anyway, since Sarah was a grown, independent woman. And I'd said yes, like I always said yes, because what else could I do? So I watched this stranger, this man who'd known my daughter for less time than it takes to grow a tomato, escort her toward her future, while I stood in the 4th row like any other guest. Sarah looked beautiful. I'll give her that. Her dress was this intricate lace thing that probably cost as much as a car, her hair pinned up with real diamonds, her smile radiant as she glided past me without a glance. When they got to the front, the officiant began the ceremony, and I tried to focus on the words, on the moment, on anything except the burning in my chest. And then came the question, the one I'd been dreading. Who gives this bride away? I held my breath. Sarah turned, looked right past Winston, right past everyone in the front rows, and for a second, her eyes met mine. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd acknowledge me. But instead, she turned back to the officiant and said, clear as a bell, I give myself away. The words echoed in that chapel, and I swear I felt something break inside my chest, something that had been cracking for years, but finally just shattered. I give myself away. Like she'd raised herself, educated herself, loved herself into existence. Like I was just a footnote in her story, easily erased. People nodded approvingly at her independence, her modern sensibility. Bradley squeezed her hand and smiled, and I stood there, 72 years old, wearing a 15-year-old suit, having sold everything I owned to make this moment possible, and realized my daughter had erased me from the most important day of her life. The reception was more of the same. I sat at a table in the back with Tom and his wife, watching Sarah and Bradley dance their first dance to some song I didn't recognize, watching Catherine dab at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, watching Winston give another toast about family and legacy and new beginnings. When they cut the cake, this massive 6-tier creation covered in sugar flowers, I thought about the birthday cakes I used to make for Sarah, lopsided things from a box mix, with candles from the dollar store. She used to tell me they were the best cakes in the world. Now she probably didn't remember they ever existed. I left before the party really got going, slipped out while people were dancing and drinking Bradley's father's top-shelf liquor. Nobody noticed me leave. I drove back to Pittsburgh that night, 8 hours alone with my thoughts, and by the time I pulled into my driveway at 3 in the morning, I felt like I'd aged 10 years. I sat in my truck for a long time, looking at my house, this small, modest place that I'd mortgaged to the hilt for a daughter who'd just publicly disowned me. And I wondered if Jennifer would be proud of what I'd done, or if she'd tell me I'd been a fool. I'd given Sarah the world, and she'd walked right past me to take it. 3 days later, the bill came due, and everything changed. I was in my kitchen making breakfast when my phone rang. It was Catherine, and even before I answered, I knew something was wrong. Her voice had lost all that smooth, sophisticated polish. She sounded panicked, almost shrill. "Richard, we have a problem. A very serious problem." I set down my coffee cup, my hand already shaking. "What kind of problem?" There was a pause, the sound of papers rustling. "The vendors are calling me. The country club, the florist, the caterer, all of them. They're saying their payments bounced. Every single one of them. The checks you wrote, they're all coming back insufficient funds." My stomach dropped. That was impossible. I'd liquidated everything, transferred it all into that account Catherine set up. $700,000. Every penny accounted for. Every payment scheduled. "That can't be right," I said. "I put the full amount in the account 6 months ago. It was all there." Catherine's laugh was bitter. "Well, it's not there now, Richard. The account is completely empty, and these vendors are threatening to sue. The country club alone is owed $400,000. They're talking about putting liens on properties, garnishing wages. This is a disaster. I sat down hard in one of my kitchen chairs, the same chairs Sarah used to sit in, doing her homework while I made dinner. Empty. The account was empty. But I'd watched Catherine deposit that money, had the bank statement showing every transfer. Catherine, I don't understand. Where did the money go? Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was cold, calculating. I think the question, Richard, is where are you going to get more money? Because these bills need to be paid, and they need to be paid now. Bradley and I just got back from our honeymoon. I'm not going to let some billing dispute ruin the start of their marriage. That's when it hit me. Billing dispute. She was already distancing herself, already making this my problem, not hers. Catherine, you set up that account. You managed all the payments. If something went wrong, it happened on your end. I could practically hear her bristle through the phone. Are you accusing me of something, Richard? Because I have a team of very expensive lawyers who would be very interested in that accusation. The threat was clear as day. I was a retired delivery driver going up against a woman who probably spent more on legal fees in a month than I made in a year. I called my bank, my hands shaking so bad I could barely dial the number. The representative pulled up the account, and what she told me made my blood run cold. The account had been set up as a joint account, Catherine's name and mine, with her as the primary account holder. And 3 weeks before the wedding, someone had transferred the entire balance to another account, one I'd never heard of, registered to an LLC in Delaware. But I didn't authorize any transfer, I told her. I didn't even know about this other account. The representative's voice was sympathetic but firm. Sir, according to our records, the transfer was made using the primary account holder's credentials. There's nothing fraudulent here from our perspective. I sat there staring at my phone after I hung up, pieces clicking into place. Catherine had taken the money. All of it. $700,000 that I'd bled myself dry to give her. Transferred to some shell company where I'd never be able to touch it. And now she was calling me, telling me I needed to pay again, as if I had another $750,000 just lying around. The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. But what could I do? Who would believe me? I had no proof, no lawyer, no way to fight someone like Catherine Ashford. The calls started coming in that afternoon. First the country club, their manager very polite but very firm about the outstanding balance. Then the florist, the caterer, the band, the photographer. Everyone wanted their money, and they all had my name on the contracts Catherine had made me sign. Mr. Sullivan, we have a legally binding agreement, the country club manager said. If payment isn't received within 10 days, we'll have no choice but to pursue legal action. I told them all the same thing. There had been a mistake. I was working to resolve it. Please be patient. But I could hear it in their voices. They'd heard excuses before. They weren't going to wait long. That night, I called Sarah. It was the first time we'd spoken since the wedding, and hearing her voice, so happy and relaxed, nearly broke me. Dad, hi, we just got back from Bali yesterday. It was absolutely incredible. She went on for 10 minutes about the resort, the beaches, the food, while I sat there trying to figure out how to tell her that her perfect wedding was about to implode. Finally, I interrupted her. Sarah, honey, I need to talk to you about something important. About the wedding. Her tone changed immediately, went cautious. What about it? I took a breath. The vendors are saying they haven't been paid. The country club, the florist, all of them. They're threatening to sue. There was silence on her end, then, what? That's impossible. Catherine handled all of that. Bradley's parents paid for everything. And there it was, the lie I'd helped Catherine build, coming back to crush me. Sarah, that's not exactly true. I need to explain something to you. But before I could continue, I heard Bradley's voice in the background, asking what was wrong. Sarah covered the phone. I could hear muffled conversation, And then she was back. "Dad, Bradley says his mother told him everything's been paid. This must be some kind of clerical error. Just give them Catherine's number. She'll straighten it out." My daughter, the lawyer, telling me to pass the buck to the woman who'd robbed me blind. I called Catherine back, told her Sarah thought she'd paid for everything. "Well, that's what we agreed on, isn't it?" Catherine said smoothly. "Sarah wasn't supposed to know you were paying, so as far as she's concerned, yes, I paid for everything. And technically, I did pay the deposits. It's the final balances that are outstanding. Your responsibility, as we discussed." The gaslighting was masterful. She was twisting everything, making it sound like I was the one breaking our agreement by not having unlimited funds. "Catherine, you took the money I gave you. $700,000. Where did it go?" Her laugh was like ice. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Richard. The account you set up clearly didn't have sufficient funds. That's not my problem." I hung up and called Tom, my brother, the only person in my life who knew what I'd actually spent on that wedding. "Tommy, I need help. I'm being scammed, and I don't know what to do." Tom listened to the whole story, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long minute. "Rick, you need a lawyer. A real lawyer, not some legal aid guy. Someone who can go up against these people. But lawyers cost money. Money I didn't have anymore. I'd sold everything. Mortgaged my house to the ceiling. Cashed out my retirement. I was 72 years old, with about $800 in my checking account, and debts piling up like snow in a blizzard. The next week was a nightmare. More calls from vendors, more threats of legal action. The country club filed a lien against my house. The caterer got a judgment to garnish my pension, what little was left of it. I stopped answering the phone, stopped checking the mail, just sat in my house watching my entire life collapse around me. And through it all, Sarah didn't call. Not once. I'd reached out twice more, trying to explain, but she kept deflecting, kept saying Catherine would handle it, kept treating me like I was making a fuss over nothing. It was like the wedding had been the final separation between us, and now I was just some old man bothering her with problems she didn't want to deal with. You know, I wonder sometimes if any of you watching this have been through something similar. Not the exact same situation, maybe, but that feeling of giving everything to someone you love and having them just not see it, not value it. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you're finding some piece of yourself in what I'm telling you here, hit that subscribe button. I've got more to say, and I think we're all in this together. Those of us who loved too much and got burned for it. 2 weeks after the wedding, Sarah finally called me. Not because she was worried about her father, but because Catherine had apparently told her there was some confusion about the wedding bills, and maybe I could clarify things. "Dad, Catherine says you're telling the vendors that you paid for the wedding. That's causing all kinds of problems with their accounting. Can you please just tell these people the truth?" I was sitting in my darkened living room, looking at a stack of collection notices on my coffee table. "What truth would that be, Sarah?" I asked quietly. She sighed, that impatient sound she'd developed in college. "The truth that Bradley's family paid for the wedding. I don't know why this is so complicated." Something in me snapped. Maybe it was the condescension in her voice. Maybe it was the way she'd erased me from her wedding, from her life. Maybe it was just exhaustion from carrying this lie for so long. "Sarah, I paid for your wedding. Every penny of it. $700,000. I sold everything I owned, took out a second mortgage, cashed out my retirement. Not Bradley's family. Me." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, "What are you talking about? Why would you do that?" Not, "Thank you." Not, "I had no idea." Just, "Why would you do that?" Like I'd committed some embarrassing social error. "Because I'm your father," I said, my voice breaking. "Because I promised your mother I'd give you the life we couldn't have. Because I love you, even though you walked down that aisle on another man's arm. Even though you told everyone you gave yourself away like I'd never existed, I did it because you're my daughter, Sarah. That's what fathers do. I could hear her breathing, fast and shallow. Dad, I can't, this doesn't make any sense. Catherine told me months ago that she wanted to pay for everything. She said it was important to their family. Why wouldn't you tell me? Because she asked me not to, I said. She said it would be better if you thought it came from them, that you'd enjoy the day more. And like a fool, I believed her. I thought I was doing something good for you. But Catherine took that money, Sarah. All of it. Put it in some account I can't access. And now the vendors are coming after me because my name is on all the contracts. I'm being buried in legal bills and collection notices for a wedding where I wasn't even allowed to walk my own daughter down the aisle. Sarah was crying now. I could hear it. Dad, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know any of this. But she didn't say she was sorry. She didn't say she'd fix it. She just kept crying. And I realized with a sick feeling that she was crying for herself, not for me. I need to go, she said finally. I need to talk to Bradley. I need to figure this out. And she hung up, leaving me alone in my dark house with nothing but the truth finally spoken and no idea if it would make any difference at all. Bradley called me an hour later, and his voice had lost all that fake friendliness he'd used when we first met. Richard, my mother explained the situation to me. According to her, you set up an account for the wedding expenses, but there were irregularities. She's very concerned about potential fraud. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Fraud. They were going to blame me. Bradley, your mother stole $700,000 from me. She set up a joint account, transferred the money to an LLC I've never heard of, and now she's pretending she doesn't know what happened. That's not fraud on my part, that's fraud on hers. His laugh was cold. My mother is a respected philanthropist, Richard. She sits on the boards of 3 major charities. The idea that she would steal money from anyone, much less you, is frankly insulting. What's more likely is that you mismanaged the funds and are now trying to blame her to avoid responsibility. I felt my face flush hot. I want my money back, Bradley. All of it. And I want Sarah to know the truth about what your family did. There was a pause. The truth, he said slowly, is that you're a bitter old man who can't accept that his daughter has moved on to a better life. My advice? Let this go. You can't win against us. We have resources you can't imagine. Lawyers, investigators, connections. If you push this, we will bury you. The threat was clear, and sitting there in my mortgaged house with collection notices piling up, I knew he was right. I couldn't win against them. Not in court, not in public opinion. I was nobody, and they were the Ashfords. Does Sarah know you're threatening me? I asked. Sarah knows what she needs to know, he replied. She knows that you're making wild accusations against my mother, that you're trying to cause problems in our marriage, and that we need to distance ourselves from the situation. She's very upset, Richard. You've hurt her terribly with these lies. And just like that, they'd flipped the script. I was the bad guy. I was the liar. I was the one hurting Sarah. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Sarah as a little girl, how she used to climb into bed with me after Jennifer died, too scared to sleep alone, how I'd hold her and tell her stories until she fell asleep, her little hand clutching my shirt, how she'd tell me she loved me more than anyone in the whole world. Where did that little girl go? When did she turn into someone who could believe I was capable of lying about something like this? I got up at dawn, made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table staring at the wall. I was 72 years old, broke, with creditors circling like sharks, and my daughter thought I was a liar. I'd hit bottom. Tom came over that morning, took one look at me, and started making phone calls. He found me a lawyer through a friend of a friend, a woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in elder financial abuse. We met in her small office downtown, and I told her the whole story from beginning to end. She took notes, asked pointed questions, and when I finished, she sat back in her chair and shook her head. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm going to be honest with you. This is going to be very difficult to prove. You signed documents giving Catherine access to that account. You have no record of where the money went after she transferred it, and her lawyers will argue that you were a willing participant in all of it." "But she stole from me," I said. $700,000. Patricia nodded. "I believe you. But belief and proof are two different things in court. What we need is documentation. Bank records showing the transfer. Information about that Delaware LLC. Anything that proves Catherine moved your money without authorization." She paused. "And even if we can prove all that, there's another problem. Your daughter. From what you've told me, Sarah believes her in-laws paid for the wedding. She's going to be a hostile witness at best. At worst, she'll testify against you." The words felt like a knife in my chest. My own daughter, testifying against me. We spent 3 weeks building a case. Patricia subpoenaed bank records, filed motions for discovery, tracked down information about the Delaware LLC. It turned out Catherine had used it before. A shell company she'd set up years ago for tax purposes. We found transfers going in and out, money moving in ways that looked a whole lot like money laundering. Patricia got excited. "This is good, Richard. This shows a pattern. But we're still going to need more. We need someone who worked with Catherine, who knows what she did." That's when I thought of the wedding planner, a young woman named Madison who'd been at all those planning meetings. Madison agreed to meet me at a coffee shop, and she looked nervous from the moment she sat down. "Mr. Sullivan, I don't know if I should be talking to you." Mrs. Ashford made it very clear that all wedding business was confidential. I leaned forward. "Madison, Catherine Ashford stole $700,000 from me. Money I spent to give my daughter a wedding she didn't even want me to be part of. I just need to know what you saw, what you know." Her eyes widened. $700,000? Mrs. Ashford told everyone the budget was $200,000. She said anything beyond that was family contributions. My heart started pounding. "What do you mean? $200,000. Madison pulled out her phone, scrolled through some files. "Look, here's the original budget Mrs. Ashford approved. Venue, $40,000. Catering, $35,000. Everything adds up to about $200,000, maybe $220,000 with tax. I remember being surprised when she kept upgrading things, adding extras. The imported flowers alone added $50,000, but she kept saying not to worry about the cost, that she had it handled. I stared at the numbers on her phone. If the original budget was $200,000, where did the other $500,000 go? I want to pause here for a second and ask you something. If you were in my shoes, what would you do at this point? Would you keep fighting, spend whatever you had left on lawyers and investigators, risk losing everything including your relationship with your daughter? Or would you walk away, accept the loss, and try to salvage what's left of your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd really like to know, because standing at that crossroads, I had no idea which way to turn. And if this story is resonating with you, if you know someone who's been taken advantage of by family, share this video. Let's help each other out. Patricia took Madison's testimony and ran with it. She filed an amended complaint, alleging not just theft, but also fraud and embezzlement. The numbers were damning. I'd paid $700,000. The actual wedding cost maybe $250,000 with all the upgrades, and the missing $450,000 had vanished into Catherine's LLC. The Ashfords responded with a motion to dismiss, claiming I had no standing to sue, that I'd been a voluntary donor to the wedding, that I was engaged in a malicious prosecution. Their lawyers filed a countersuit for defamation, asking for damages of $2 million. $2 million for telling the truth about what they'd done to me. Sarah called me the day she was served with a subpoena to give a deposition. "Dad, what are you doing? Why are you suing Bradley's family? Why are you dragging me into this?" Her voice was shrill, panicked. I'd never heard her sound like that before. Sarah, I'm trying to get back the money your mother-in-law stole from me. Money I gave you for your wedding. I don't understand why you're defending her. She was crying again. I'm not defending anyone. I just want this to stop. Bradley's parents are furious. They're saying terrible things about you, about our family. They're talking about cutting us off, Dad. Do you understand what that means? And there it was, finally out in the open. She wasn't upset that I'd been robbed. She was upset that it might affect her marriage, her standing with the Ashfords, her new life. Sarah, do you even care what they did to me? Do you care that I sold everything I owned, that I'm losing my house, that I might end up on the street? Silence. Long, horrible silence. Dad, I can't talk about this right now. I just can't. And she hung up. My daughter, the lawyer, who should understand justice better than anyone, had just chosen money and status over her own father. The deposition was scheduled for a Thursday morning in the Ashford's lawyers' conference room, 30 floors up in a Manhattan skyscraper. Patricia and I took the train up together, and she prepped me the whole way. They're going to try to rattle you, she said. They're going to bring up every mistake you ever made, every time you struggled financially, every way you're not like them. Don't take the bait. Just answer the questions truthfully and simply. I nodded, but my hands were shaking. I hadn't seen Sarah in person since the wedding, and knowing she'd be in that room, watching me get torn apart by her in-laws' lawyers, made me feel sick. The conference room was all glass and chrome, with a view of Central Park that probably cost more per square foot than my entire house. Catherine was there with her lawyer, a shark in a $3,000 suit. Bradley was there, looking at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. And Sarah was there, sitting as far from me as possible, refusing to meet my eyes. The court reporter set up her machine. The lawyers exchanged pleasantries, and then it began. Mr. Sullivan, the Ashford's lawyer started, you claim you paid $700,000 for your daughter's wedding. Is that correct? I said yes. And you did this voluntarily? No one forced you? Yes. And you signed documents setting up a joint account with Mrs. Ashford? Yes. So let me understand this correctly, he continued, pacing like he was in front of a jury. You voluntarily gave $700,000 to pay for a wedding. You signed legal documents agreeing to joint account ownership, and now, months later, you're claiming fraud because you've run out of money and are facing the consequences of your own financial decisions. Is that accurate? I looked at Patricia, who nodded slightly. No, I said. That's not accurate. I gave the money in good faith, believing it would be used to pay for my daughter's wedding. Mrs. Ashford transferred that money to an account I didn't know about, pocketed the difference between what the wedding actually cost and what I paid, and is now pretending it never happened. Catherine's lawyer smiled. Do you have any proof of this alleged theft? Any documentation showing where the money went? That's when Patricia stepped in, sliding a folder across the table. Actually, we do. Bank records showing transfers from the joint account to an LLC owned by Mrs. Ashford. Records showing that LLC has been used in similar transactions before, and testimony from the wedding planner that the actual cost of the wedding was less than half of what Mr. Sullivan paid. The lawyer's smile faded. He flipped through the documents, and I saw something flicker across his face. Concern, maybe, or calculation. He turned to Catherine, whispered something I couldn't hear. She whispered back, her face tight. Then he looked at Sarah. Ms. Ashford, did you have any knowledge of these financial arrangements? Sarah shook her head. No. I thought Bradley's parents paid for everything. My father never told me he was involved financially. The lawyer leaned forward. And if you had known your father was paying, would you have accepted such an extravagant wedding? Sarah hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw the truth. I don't know. Probably not. It seems excessive. Excessive. The word hung in the air. My life savings? Excessive. The deposition went on for 4 hours. They asked about my finances, my education, my relationship with Sarah, every detail of my life they could use to paint me as an unreliable witness. But Patricia had prepared me well, and I didn't crack. When it was over, Catherine's lawyer asked to speak with Patricia privately. Sarah left without saying a word to me, following Bradley out like a shadow. I sat alone in that conference room, looking out at Central Park, thinking about how I used to take Sarah to the playground when she was little, pushing her on the swings until my arms ached. That felt like a different lifetime now. Patricia came back 20 minutes later with a strange expression on her face. "They want to settle," she said. "Catherine's lawyer knows we have them. The LLC paper trail is damning. He's offering to return $200,000 and drop the defamation suit if you agree to sign an NDA and drop your claims." $200,000. Less than a third of what I'd paid. "What about the rest?" I asked. Patricia shook her head. "He's claiming the rest was legitimately spent on wedding expenses we can't account for. It's a lie, but it's a lie that's hard to disprove without a full forensic audit, which would cost more than we'd recover." Oh, I thought about it on the train ride home. $200,000 would save my house, pay off most of my debts, give me something to live on, but it would also mean signing away my right to tell the truth, to hold Catherine accountable, to let Sarah know what her in-laws really were. "What do you think I should do?" I asked Patricia. She was quiet for a minute. "Honestly, Richard, take the money. You'll never get full justice here. The system isn't built for people like you to win against people like them. But 200,000 is enough to rebuild. It's enough to survive." That night, I sat in my kitchen with the settlement offer in front of me, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. I thought about Jennifer, about the promises I'd made her. I thought about Sarah as a little girl, and Sarah as she was now, a stranger who valued money over family. I thought about myself, 72 years old, nearly broke, exhausted from fighting, and I made my decision. But before I could sign those papers, my phone rang. It was Sarah, and she was crying so hard I could barely understand her. "Dad," she sobbed. "Dad, I need to tell you something. I need you to know the truth." And just like that, everything was about to change one more time. "Dad," Sarah sobbed through the phone. "Dad, I need to tell you something. I need you to know the truth." I gripped the receiver so hard my knuckles went white. "What truth, Sarah?" She was crying so hard she could barely get the words out. "I found something. Papers in Bradley's office. He left his briefcase open, and I saw your name, so I looked. And Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." My heart was hammering. "What did you find?" She took a shuddering breath. "Bank statements, transfers, an account in the Bahamas. Dad, Catherine didn't just take your money. She's been doing this for years, to other people. And Bradley knew. He knew the whole time." I sat down hard, my legs giving out. "He knew? Everything," Sarah whispered. "There are emails, Dad. Emails between him and his mother from before our wedding, talking about how to handle you, how to keep you quiet, how to make sure you couldn't prove anything. They called you an easy mark. They said you were so desperate to be part of my life that you'd do anything, pay anything, and never fight back because you loved me too much." Each word was a knife in my chest. "How long have you known?" I asked quietly. "I found the papers 2 days ago. I've been trying to figure out what to do. Bradley doesn't know I saw them. I copied everything and took it to a lawyer. A real lawyer. Not anyone connected to his family." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. There was a long pause. "Because I was at that deposition, Dad. I watched you sit there and take all those questions, all those accusations, and you never once got angry. You just kept telling the truth. And I realized that my whole life, that's what you've done. You've just loved me and told the truth, and tried to protect me, even when it cost you everything, even when I didn't deserve it." Her voice cracked. "Even when I walked down the aisle on Winston's arm instead of yours. Even when I said I gave myself away, like you'd never raised me, like you'd never mattered. You still tried to protect me. I couldn't speak. Tears were running down my face, the first I'd cried through this whole nightmare. I don't know what to say, sweetheart. Don't say anything yet, she said. Just meet me tomorrow. I'm coming home to Pittsburgh. I'm bringing the documents. And Dad, I'm bringing something else too. Something I think will change everything. She gave me a time and place, a coffee shop we used to go to when she was in high school, back when we'd talk for hours about her dreams and her future. I'll be there, I told her. Sarah, are you safe? She laughed, but it was bitter. I'm staying at a hotel. I left Bradley 3 days ago. I haven't been safe for a long time, Dad. I just didn't know it. I called Patricia that night and told her everything. She was silent for a long minute, then, Richard, if Sarah really has documentation of a pattern of fraud, this changes everything. We're not just talking about getting your money back. We're talking about criminal charges, federal charges, potentially, if money crossed state lines or international borders. My hands were shaking. I don't want to hurt Sarah. This is her marriage, her life. Patricia's voice was gentle but firm. Richard, from what you just told me, Sarah is already hurt. She's already left him. Now she's trying to do the right thing. Let her. I barely slept that night. I kept thinking about Sarah's voice on the phone, how young she'd sounded, how scared. My little girl, who I'd tried so hard to protect, had walked straight into a family of con artists, and I'd helped pay for the privilege. At dawn, I got up, showered, put on my cleanest shirt, and drove to the coffee shop. I got there 30 minutes early and sat in a booth by the window, drinking terrible coffee and watching the door. When Sarah walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She'd lost weight, had dark circles under her eyes, and was wearing jeans and a sweater instead of the designer clothes she'd adopted. She looked like my daughter again. She slid into the booth across from me and just stared for a minute. Then she reached across the table and took my hands. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry for everything. For the wedding, for not believing you, for choosing them over you. I was so caught up in that world, in being Mrs. Bradley Ashford, and having the life I thought I wanted, that I forgot where I came from. I forgot who you are. I forgot who I was supposed to be. I squeezed her hands. You're here now. That's what matters. She pulled a manila envelope from her bag, thick with papers. This is everything. Bank statements showing Catherine has stolen from at least 6 other people in the last 10 years. Emails between her and Bradley planning how to handle you. And this, she pulled out a separate document, this is a full accounting of your wedding expenses. I opened it with shaking hands. The numbers were all there, meticulously documented. Venue, $40,000. Catering, $38,000. Flowers, $52,000 with all the upgrades. Band, photographer, dress, cake, every single expense itemized and totaled. The final number was $263,000. I'd paid $700,000. Where's the rest? I asked, though I already knew. Catherine's LLC, Sarah said. $437,000, transferred 3 days after your final payment cleared. And Dad? She did the exact same thing to a couple in Boston 2 years ago. Set up their daughter's wedding, took their money, pocketed the difference. They sued but settled because they couldn't afford to fight her. Patricia arrived 20 minutes later, took one look at the documents, and her eyes went wide. This is a prosecutor's dream. Multiple victims, clear pattern of behavior, documented transfers. Richard, with this, we don't just sue. We go to the district attorney. Sarah's face was pale, but determined. There's more. I'm willing to testify. Against Catherine, against Bradley, against all of them. I know what that means for my marriage, for my life, but I can't be part of this anymore. I can't be married to someone who helped his mother steal from my father. The next week moved like a tornado. Patricia took the documents to the DA's office in Manhattan. They opened an investigation immediately, brought in the FBI because money had crossed state lines. Catherine was arrested on a Tuesday morning, walked out of her Fifth Avenue penthouse in handcuffs while news cameras rolled. Bradley lawyered up, claimed he knew nothing, but Sarah's testimony and his own emails buried him. The Delaware LLC was frozen, assets seized. And slowly, painfully, the truth came out. Catherine had been running this scam for over a decade, targeting parents desperate to give their children perfect weddings, taking their money and vanishing it into offshore accounts. The media had a field day. Society maven arrested in wedding fraud scheme. Millionaire philanthropist accused of stealing from working-class families. My phone rang off the hook with reporters wanting my story, but Patricia told me to stay quiet until after the trial. Sarah moved back to Pittsburgh, staying in her old room while her divorce went through. It was strange having her there, like we'd gone back in time, except we couldn't. Too much had happened. But we tried. We had breakfast together, went for walks, talked about everything and nothing. One night she said, "I don't know who I am anymore, Dad. I spent so long trying to be someone else, trying to fit into their world, that I lost myself." "You're Sarah Jennifer Sullivan," I told her. "You're strong and smart and brave enough to walk away from a lie. You're your mother's daughter, and you're going to be okay." She cried then, really cried, and I held her like I used to when she was little and the world seemed too big and scary. "I'm so ashamed," she whispered, "of the wedding, of how I treated you, of all of it." I walked down that aisle on Winston's arm because Catherine said it would mean so much to their family, and I was too much of a coward to say no. I told everyone I gave myself away because I thought it made me sound independent and modern. I didn't think about what it would do to you. "I know," I said, "and I forgive you." She pulled back, looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "How can you forgive me so easily?" I smiled. "Because you're my daughter, Sarah. Because I've loved you since the moment you were born, and I'll love you until the day I die. That's what parents do. We forgive, we wait, we hope that one day our kids will see what we've been trying to show them all along." She hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. "I see it now, Dad. I finally see it." The trial started in October, 6 months after the wedding. The prosecution brought in all 6 families Catherine had scammed, one after another telling stories just like mine. Parents who'd bankrupted themselves, who'd mortgaged their homes, who'd cashed out retirement funds, all to give their children perfect weddings that became perfect crimes. The jury looked sickened. Catherine sat through it all with her lawyer, perfectly composed in her designer suits, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She knew she was done. Bradley took a plea deal, testified against his mother in exchange for reduced charges. Watching him on that stand, describing how they'd planned it, how they'd targeted me specifically because Sarah had told Catherine I'd do anything for her, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of letting go. Sarah testified too, and it was the hardest thing I've ever watched. She had to describe her own wedding, her own marriage, admit that she'd been blind to what was happening right in front of her. Bradley's lawyer tried to make her look complicit, tried to suggest she'd known all along, but she held firm. "I trusted my husband," she said clearly. "I trusted his family, and they used that trust to steal from my father, the man who raised me alone, who gave me everything he had. I will never forgive myself for being so naive, but I'm here now, telling the truth, and I hope that counts for something." The verdict came back after 3 days of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. Catherine was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Bradley got 5 years and a lifetime ban from practicing law. The assets from the Delaware LLC were seized and distributed to the victims. I got back $412,000, more than I'd ever expected to see again. It wasn't everything I'd lost, but it was enough. Enough to pay off the mortgage, clear the debts, put something away for the future. Enough to breathe again. But the money wasn't the real victory. The real victory was Sarah. sitting next to me when the verdict was read, squeezing my hand so tight it hurt. The real victory was walking out of that courthouse together, father and daughter, and having her say, "I'm proud to be your daughter, Dad. I'm proud of where I come from." The real victory was building something new from the wreckage of what we'd lost. She moved back to Pittsburgh permanently, started over with a small law firm that did family law and elder abuse cases. She said she wanted to help people like me, people who got taken advantage of by the people they trusted most. We had Thanksgiving together that year, just the two of us in my small house. Sarah cooked, I helped, and we didn't talk about the trial or the Ashfords or any of it. We just ate turkey and stuffing and pie, and we watched football, and she told me about a case she was working on, a grandmother whose son had stolen her savings. "I think we can help her," Sarah said. "I think we can make it right." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw Jennifer in her eyes. Not the sick, dying Jennifer from the hospital, but the young Jennifer who'd believed we could build something beautiful together, even though we had nothing. And I knew we were going to be okay. Tom came over for Christmas, brought his wife and kids, and for the first time in years, my house was full of life and laughter. Sarah was different now, softer somehow, more present. She asked me to tell stories about her mother, about when she was little, things she'd forgotten or never known. I told her about the first Christmas after she was born, how we were so broke we'd made decorations out of construction paper and popcorn strings, but Jennifer had made it magical anyway. She had this way of making everything feel special, I said. Even when we had nothing, we had everything because we had each other. "That's how I want to live," Sarah said quietly. "Not chasing money or status, or trying to impress people who don't matter. Just being present with the people who love me, who really love me, not what I can do for them or who they think I should be." She looked at me. "I want to be like you, Dad. I want to work hard and love generously and not keep score. I want to be the kind of person Mom would be proud of." My eyes filled with tears. "She'd be so proud of you, sweetheart, for having the courage to walk away, for telling the truth, for starting over. I'm proud of you, too." New Year's Eve, we sat on my porch watching fireworks from the neighborhood, wrapped in blankets because it was freezing. Sarah was quiet for a long time, then said, "Dad, I need to tell you something." My stomach clenched. "What is it?" She took a breath. "I found Mom's wedding ring, the one you sold to help me with law school. I tracked it down through the pawn shop records, and I bought it back. It took me months and most of my savings, but I got it." She pulled a small box from her pocket, opened it. There was Jennifer's ring, the simple gold band with the tiny diamond we'd picked out together 30 years ago. I couldn't speak. I just stared at that ring, remembering Jennifer's face when I'd slipped it on her finger, the way she'd cried and laughed and said yes, even though we couldn't afford anything fancy. "I want you to have it," Sarah said. "I know I can never make up for what happened, for what I put you through, for the wedding and everything after, but I want you to know that I see now what you sacrificed, all of it, and I'm sorry I ever made you feel like it didn't matter." I took the box with shaking hands. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did," she said firmly, "because you're my dad, and you've given me everything, and it's time I gave something back." So, we sat there, crying and laughing and watching the sky light up with colors, and I thought about how far we'd come from that terrible day at the altar, how we'd gone through fire and come out changed, but not broken, how sometimes the worst things that happen to us end up being the things that save us, that force us to see what really matters. I'd lost almost everything: my savings, my security, my illusions about my daughter, but I'd gained something too. I'd gained her back, really back, not just in body, but in spirit. The Sarah sitting next to me wasn't the woman who'd walked down that aisle on a stranger's arm. She was my daughter again. Spring came, and with it, a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. Sarah and I developed new routines: Sunday dinners, Saturday morning walks, Evenings sitting on the porch talking about everything and nothing. She started dating again, carefully this time, and she'd bring guys by to meet me before things got serious. "I need to know what you think," she'd say. "Your opinion matters, Dad. It always should have mattered." I met teachers and accountants and a firefighter who made her laugh, good men with calloused hands and honest eyes, men who didn't care that she'd been married to an Ashford or that she came with baggage, men who saw her for who she really was. One Saturday in May, we drove out to Jennifer's grave together. We hadn't been there together in probably 10 years, not since Sarah left for college. We brought flowers, cleaned the headstone, sat in the grass like we used to when Sarah was young. "I used to come here all the time when you were little," I told her. "Whenever I didn't know what to do, whenever I was scared I was failing you, I'd come here and talk to your mother. Ask her what to do." Sarah wiped her eyes. "What would she say?" I smiled. "Mostly, she'd tell me to trust you, that you were strong and smart, and you'd figure things out eventually, that my job was just to love you and be there when you needed me." "Was she right?" Sarah asked. "About all of it?" I looked at my daughter, 39 years old now, sitting cross-legged in the grass like she was 10 again. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, she was right. It took longer than either of us expected, and the road was rougher than we hoped. But you figured it out. You came home." Sarah leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm sorry it took me so long, Dad. I'm sorry you had to go through all of that before I woke up." I put my arm around her. "You're here now. That's all that matters. You're here, and you're choosing right, and your mother is so proud of you. I know she is. I can feel it." The settlement money I'd gotten back from Catherine's seized assets, I ended up using most of it to help start a foundation. Sarah's idea, actually. We called it the Jennifer Sullivan Fund for Elder Protection, and it helps older people who've been financially exploited by family members, helps them get lawyers, navigate the system, rebuild their lives. Sarah runs it, pro bono, and I help out where I can. We've helped over 40 families so far, saved homes, recovered stolen money, put abusers in jail. Every time we help someone, every time we see a family reunite after fraud tore them apart, I think about how Jennifer would love this, how she'd love that we turned our pain into purpose. Tom asked me once if I regretted it all. The wedding, the money, everything that happened. I thought about it for a long time before I answered. "I regret that it happened the way it did," I told him. "I regret that Sarah had to go through all that pain to learn what she should have known all along. I regret that Catherine and Bradley hurt so many people. But do I regret fighting for my daughter? Do I regret loving her enough to bankrupt myself? No. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because at the end of all of it, I got my daughter back. The real Sarah, not the one pretending to be someone else. And that's worth every penny I lost, every sleepless night, every moment of heartbreak." Last month, Sarah asked me to walk with her in a 5K to raise money for the foundation. I'm 72, haven't run in decades, but I said yes. We walked the whole thing together, her matching her pace to mine, talking and laughing the whole way. At the finish line, they took our picture. And later when I looked at it, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. I saw a father and daughter who knew each other, really knew each other, who'd been through hell and come out holding hands. I got that picture framed, put it on my mantle next to the wedding photo from that day at the country club. It's important to remember both, I think, where we were and where we are now. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that moment at the altar, standing in the 4th row, watching Sarah on Winston's arm, hearing her say, "I give myself away." It doesn't hurt like it used to. Now it feels like something that had to happen, like a bone that has to break before it can heal stronger. Sarah and I had to break before we could heal. We had to lose everything before we could figure out what really mattered. And what matters isn't money, or status, or perfect weddings. What matters is showing up, telling the truth, loving people even when they can't love you back, and having faith that eventually If you love them hard enough and long enough, they'll find their way home. Sarah's been seeing someone seriously for about 6 months now. His name is Marcus. He's a high school teacher, coaches basketball on the side. He's good to her, makes her laugh, treats her like she's precious. Last week they came over for dinner, and Marcus asked if he could talk to me privately. We went out on the porch, and he was nervous, fumbling with his words. "Mr. Sullivan," he finally said, "I love your daughter. I want to marry her. I want to do this right, so I'm asking your permission." I looked at this young man, this good man who saw Sarah for who she really was, and I felt something settle in my chest. Peace, maybe, or just rightness. "Does she love you?" I asked. He smiled. "Yes, sir, she does." "And you'll take care of her? You'll be there when things get hard? When money's tight? When life doesn't go the way you planned?" He met my eyes. "Yes, sir, I promise." I held out my hand and he shook it. "Then you have my blessing." "But Marcus, when you get married, and I hope you do, I want you to know that you don't have to ask me to walk her down the aisle. You don't have to worry about hurting my feelings or making things uncomfortable. However Sarah wants to do it, that's fine with me. Because I've learned that it's not about who gives her away. It's about who shows up, who stays, who loves her no matter what. And I'll be there doing that, whether I'm in the front row or the back." He got a little choked up. "Mr. Sullivan, if we do get married, Sarah's already told me she wants you to walk her down the aisle. She says she didn't do it right the first time, but if she gets another chance, she wants everyone to know who her father is and what you mean to her." I had to turn away because I was crying, and I didn't want him to see. "That would mean everything to me," I managed to say. "Everything." We stood there on that porch, watching the sun set, and I thought about Jennifer, about how she'd love Marcus, how she'd love seeing Sarah happy and healthy, and home, how she'd love knowing that our daughter had found her way back to us. They're talking about a small wedding next spring. Nothing fancy, just family and close friends, maybe in Tom's backyard or at the little church Jennifer and I got married in. Sarah showed me a simple dress she's thinking about, nothing like that elaborate lace creation from the Ashford wedding. "I don't want anything that even reminds me of that day," she said. "I want something real, something us." And I told her that whatever she wanted was perfect, that I'd be honored to be there however she needed me. But inside, my heart was singing, because this time I wouldn't be hidden in the 4th row. This time, my daughter wanted the world to know I was her father. So that's my story. 72 years old, sitting here in my den with a cold cup of coffee, telling you about the worst and best things that ever happened to me, about a wedding that cost me everything and gave me back what mattered most, about a daughter who got lost and found her way home, about learning that love isn't about money or status or perfect moments. It's about showing up over and over, even when it costs you everything, even when you get nothing back, because that's what love does. It shows up, it waits, it hopes, and sometimes, if you're very lucky, it gets rewarded with exactly what it's been hoping for all along. So that's my story. What did you think? Would you have done the same thing? Would you have fought for your kid, even when they'd given up on you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your own family, your own struggles, your own journey back to what matters, give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to my channel too, because I've got plenty more stories where this came from. Stories about love and loss and finding your way home. Until next time, this is Richard Sullivan, reminding you that it's never too late to tell the truth, it's never too late to forgive, and it's never too late to come home.